Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be going over some of the bigger planned buildings in the city of Cleveland, Ohio that were never built. Yes, always a very interesting thought. Buildings, what could have been, the renderings, the drawings going all the way back to the early 1900s in the city of Cleveland, Ohio, and I did utilize, this is what I came across for the idea, 10 proposed Cleveland buildings and projects that never came to pass, and then I branched off of this and found some other ones as well. And the first one that they did show was the Lake Erie International Jetport out in the middle of Lake Erie with a massive bridge connecting it to the city of Cleveland. The idea first came up in the early 1960s before it was abandoned in the mid 1970s. You can see the configuration. The configuration included 3 main runways that were parallel to the shore and then 4 cross secondary runways as well. A very interesting design that never happened, and there are those few drawings of it. The next unbuilt thing in Cleveland, Ohio, it is the Ohio Recreation Tower, which was originally designed all the way back in the early 1900s. Take a look at that weird contraption with all of those almost little trolleys going around the side of the building, and then at the top you can see, looks like there's some fun little areas, maybe some restaurants up there. This tower never happened. It was designed in the early 1900s. There's not a ton of information on it. The next one, this would have been the biggest skyscraper in the city of Cleveland, Ohio. The Ameritrust Tower, dating back to 1991, which was scheduled to be built near Public Square, and the total height of it was just under 1,200 feet. You can take a look at the overall design of it. Certainly would have been interesting and completely changed the skyline of Cleveland, Ohio. There are very few skyscrapers. This would have been a big one for the city, but it never ended up happening. You can see 63 total floors, and the current status of it is abandoned. This is just another different airport design for Cleveland, Ohio. Now, Cleveland's airport, Akron-Hopkins, is actually not in Cleveland, so there were several different airports that were designed in Cleveland. This is another one, obviously a while ago, but you can see it looks like any futuristic thing that people planned in the 1960s or 1970s with the different terminals and the overall renderings in terms of that airport. This is an interesting design, a 1930 drawing of what Euclid Avenue could have potentially looked like. This is what they envisioned for Cleveland, Ohio, as it was a rising city. Almost looks like New York City with all of the walkways, the areas to move around, a lot of foot traffic there, the land bridges going across. That never happened, obviously, but that's an interesting hypothetical to think of. The next one, this would have been another tall building around 850 feet tall, located at Lakeside Avenue in Cleveland, the corporate headquarters of Progressive. It was originally designed in 1987 before the project was officially abandoned. Kind of the skyscraper, very unique design. You can see it right there, but it never ended up happening. This next one was announced just back in 2015, an office building of 21 floors. It was a mixed-use proposal, and the renderings on this are very interesting because it would have changed the surrounding area right next to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse and Progressive Field. You can actually see both of them in the renderings, again, designed in 2015, so you can see LeBron right there as well, considering the Cavs, at that point in 2015, they had LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love, and you can see a few different mixed buildings that would have went up surrounding both the main arena and a main stadium in Cleveland, Ohio. The next one is the second phase of the Jack Cleveland Casino, which was a casino that Cleveland got, but it was a reused building. You can take a look at the original renderings. Dan Gilbert in on this project back in 2010. Phase 2 didn't happen, and they're just left with the original casino, which again was a repurposed building, so it's not even like it's really a new casino in terms of that. The next building that was never built, it is the Cleveland Hexatron, which would have been a multi-purpose indoor stadium for both the Indians and the Browns in the 70s and 80s when Cleveland, they were playing at Cleveland Municipal. It was getting older. That was a multi-purpose stadium. But still, if you're talking about the 70s or 80s in terms of stadiums, multi-purpose stadiums were still in. It was still considered the cost-efficient thing to do. And they thought of possibly designing a Hexatron, which really would have been before its time when you look at the initial design, kind of with the translucent roof going all the way around. Would have been a very interesting building at this point if it was built in the 70s or early 80s. I think it would already be demolished by now because it'd be completely obsolete. But either way, it would be a cool idea, kind of some hypothetical that never ended up happening. I did a video on the potential Cleveland Hexatron 4 or 5 months ago. And then just in general, hypothetical, the Cleveland Browns, the idea of adding a roof or building a roof stadium, a dome stadium, that's been around really since 2010, 2011 when they first envisioned the idea of adding a roof onto Cleveland Browns Stadium, but it's never happened and it's never been built. And then the next one, this one actually might end up happening. You could also argue a thing that hasn't been built, at least not yet, is the lakefront proposal revitalization plan that Jimmy Haslam and the Cleveland Browns have thought of, where they're trying to revitalize the entire lakefront next to Cleveland Browns Stadium. Again, I would imagine by 2030 something will certainly happen, but at this point, I mean, there's a number of stadiums in the 60s and 70s that originally were proposed, many of them multi-purpose in Cleveland, Ohio, to replace Cleveland Municipal Stadium. Cleveland Municipal Stadium was able to last until the 1990s, although it was considered very outdated and completely obsolete at that point. And then you did have the Indians moving into originally what was Jacobs Field. There was really no other stadium proposal other than Jacobs Field and what they were building there in terms of that. And then you also had the Cavs with the Gund Arena. The Browns, of course, left and then came back, and they had to build Cleveland Browns Stadium a little bit rushed. But in general, I would say in terms of never built stadiums, the Hexatron, along with a few other multi-purpose ones that look completely, I mean, if you're designing a stadium in the 60s or 70s, the, models of it, it's just going to be the models of it are going to lack significant detail, obviously. Then if you really want to get nerdy about it when it comes to stadium renovations, the Indians, now the Guardians, had this proposal. You can see, I call it the shopping mall proposal because it almost looks like escalators in there. But yeah, that was an original design that they had down the third base line, and they had kind of a combined building that would have been connected to it on the outside in another rendering. That's not happening. They're completely doing something different, but I guess you could technically that is a never built, renovation in the city of Cleveland, Ohio. And then the next one, this one actually might end up happening. It is Cleveland State building a brand new arena. The total cost of this project would be around $650 million. Now, it's not just the arena's cost. They're going to build up a bunch of buildings around the area as well. And they're hoping to have a plan finalized by, well, they said the end of 2023, but you know how these projects go. I'm sure it's been delayed 100 times to find the funding. But Cleveland State, they're trying to build this. But right now, technically, you can say this is an unbuilt building, an unbuilt arena in Cleveland, Ohio. But either way, guys, those are just some different hypotheticals, some unbuilt buildings / airports, whatever you want to call it, in the city. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.